Someone drives the same route to work every day for years. One morning, their GPS suggests a different path, one that takes 4 minutes longer according to the app's own estimate. They follow it anyway, trusting the app more than their own memory of the road. When they arrive, it actually took the same amount of time as their usual route, maybe even a little less. This wasn't a bug, and it wasn't the app being wrong about traffic. It was the app doing exactly what it was designed to do, just not necessarily for the reason most people assume. Modern navigation apps aren't simply calculating the fastest path from point A to point B for you individually. They're managing traffic flow across an entire city for everyone using the app at the same time, and your specific 4 extra minutes might be the price of keeping the whole system from collapsing into gridlock. It's an uncomfortable thought the first time it occurs to you, that the app quietly treating you as one data point among millions might actually be the reason your commute stays livable at all, rather than a betrayal of the personal, private assistant relationship the interface seems to promise. Navigation apps feel deeply personal when you use them, a private assistant calculating the single best route, just for you, based on live conditions only it can see. And in a narrow sense, that's true. The app is using real-time data specific to your location and destination. But zoom out, and a different picture emerges. According to research published by transportation engineers and traffic management researchers, when large numbers of drivers all use the same routing algorithm optimizing purely for individual speed, a well-documented phenomenon occurs where popular alternate routes become just as congested as the roads people were originally trying to avoid, sometimes even more congested, because everyone gets routed toward the same shortcut at the same time. This means an app that only optimized for each individual driver's personal fastest time would actually make traffic worse for everyone, including that same driver, the very next time they needed to travel. This isn't a minor academic footnote either. It's a well-studied effect in transportation research, sometimes discussed under names like Breis's paradox, where adding what looks like a helpful new option to a road network can, under the right conditions, make average travel times worse for the entire system, precisely because everyone rushes toward the same newly attractive choice at once. Let's start with the basic mechanics of how modern routing algorithms actually work, because they've evolved well beyond simply finding the shortest path on a map. Early digital mapping tools essentially solved a straightforward graph problem, treating roads as connected line segments with fixed distances and calculating the mathematically shortest path between 2 points, similar to solving a maze. Modern routing systems layer live and predicted traffic data on top of that graph, adjusting the cost of each road segment based on current congestion, historical patterns for that specific time of day and day of week, and, increasingly, anticipated congestion caused by the routing decisions the app itself is currently making for other drivers in the same area. The technical process works like this. The app doesn't just check current conditions, it runs a kind of forward simulation, estimating what traffic will look like in the near future if a certain number of its own users get routed down a particular street, and it adjusts recommendations across its whole user base to avoid creating brand new bottlenecks out of the very shortcuts it just suggested. This is where an invisible optimization target takes over, one that most users never see explicitly stated anywhere in the app's interface. Instead of optimizing purely for fastest route for this one driver, well-designed traffic-aware routing systems increasingly optimize for something closer to fastest average outcome across the whole population of current users, sometimes called system-level or Nash equilibrium routing in transportation research. In practice, this can mean deliberately routing a portion of drivers heading in a similar direction on a slightly different paths, even when one path looks marginally faster on paper for any single driver, specifically to prevent a pile-up effect, where thousands of individually optimal choices collectively create the exact traffic jam everyone was trying to avoid. Your 4 extra minutes isn't a mistake in this framework. It's a small, deliberate sacrifice that keeps the road network as a whole moving faster for the larger group you happen to be part of during that drive. There's a related invisible mechanism tied to how these apps handle popular alternate routes specifically. When a residential street becomes a well-known shortcut around a highway backup, routing algorithms detect the surge of app-directed traffic onto that street in near real time. Rather than continuing to send everyone down the same increasingly crowded shortcut, well-tuned systems start spreading the load, directing a portion of new users toward a second or third alternate path, or even occasionally back toward the original route, once the shortcut's own congestion approaches the point where it would stop being faster at all. This is why the best route sometimes seems to change slightly between 2 people checking directions to the exact same destination minutes apart, even with identical live traffic data available to both of them. 2 real-world patterns make this concrete. Several major cities have documented complaints from residents on streets that became viral shortcuts practically overnight after a nearby highway incident, with local governments in some cases installing traffic calming measures like speed bumps or turn restrictions specifically because navigation apps were sending a volume of traffic those residential streets were never designed to handle. In response, some navigation companies have worked directly with city transportation departments, adjusting their algorithms to deprioritize specific residential streets. Not because those streets aren't technically faster in isolation, but because the broader traffic and safety impact of routing thousands of app users down them outweighed the individual time savings. A second pattern shows up in disaster and emergency evacuation research, where transportation planners have found that naive, individually optimized routing during mass evacuations can create catastrophic gridlock precisely because everyone gets sent toward the same best evacuation route simultaneously, which is part of why some emergency management systems now deliberately stagger or diversify recommended routes rather than pointing an entire population toward a single optimal path. Researchers studying hurricane and wildfire evacuations in particular have noted that the single most dangerous outcome isn't a slightly longer average travel time. It's a small number of routes becoming so overloaded that they effectively stop functioning altogether, trapping people who might have escaped safely on a route that looked, on paper, only marginally slower. This challenges the common assumption that a navigation app's only job is to serve your individual trip as fast as mathematically possible, with zero consideration for anyone else on the road. In reality, a meaningful portion of modern routing behavior reflects a trade-off between what's fastest for one person in isolation and what's sustainable for an entire transportation network under real, shared, finite road capacity. The friction point isn't that the app doesn't care about you specifically, it's that treating every driver's request in total isolation, with no regard for what millions of other simultaneous requests are doing to the same shared roads, would produce worse outcomes for nearly everyone, including you, almost immediately. Zoom out. And this tension between individually optimal choices and collectively sustainable outcomes shows up constantly in other shared resource systems. Internet service providers manage bandwidth allocation similarly, sometimes deliberately throttling or shaping traffic during peak hours so that no single high-usage connection degrades the experience for everyone else sharing the same network infrastructure. Grid-level electricity systems balance demand across an entire region using similar real-time load adjustment principles, sometimes asking individual households to shift usage to off-peak hours specifically to prevent the kind of systemic overload that would otherwise cause outages affecting everyone. In every one of these systems, a resource that looks unlimited and personal from any single user's perspective is actually a shared, finite pool, and the software managing it has to balance individual requests against the health of the entire system those requests all depend on. It's a strange kind of infrastructure to live inside without ever really noticing it. One where the interface presents itself as a private assistant acting purely in your interest, while quietly performing a much larger balancing act behind the scenes on behalf of everyone plugged into the same shared network at the same moment. So the next time your GPS suggests a route that looks slightly slower on paper, it's worth remembering what's actually happening underneath that recommendation. It probably isn't a mistake, and it probably isn't the app failing to notice a faster path. It's more likely a small, deliberate adjustment, one thread in a much larger calculation, trying to keep an entire city's traffic moving as smoothly as possible, with your specific trip being just one moving part inside a system built to serve everyone using the road at the exact same moment you are.